Thank you everyone for coming and joining this talk, this review. Thank you, Lison, Noemi, everyone from the program. I'm very excited to share with you this book that was commissioned for a show that just ended here in New York called Interspecies Futures. It went from April 16 to June 26. So I'm gonna share my screen so you get more interesting visuals. So this was Interspecies Futures, and the show highlighted 17 books, all published within the last 5 years by artists. Some of them call themselves bio-artists or speculative designers. And they've been really paying attention to our relationship with other species in a world where climate change, wildfires, pandemics are a cause of our relationship to nature and how we are operating within it. So this show, which I'll introduce you quickly, is the result of a couple of years of research into how these young creatives are using the book, the codex, as a tool to manifest these stories and these alternative realities. So here's a couple of shots. This is the main gallery of the Center for Book Arts in New York. And the large table on the right side highlights books that I identified from 2017 to 2019 with different species like jellyfish, mushroom, bacteria, crickets, goldfish, termites, dodos, and spiders. And on the left side is a table with books that I commissioned specifically to be released during the show. That means all of these books on the left were created during the pandemic year in 2020. And they highlight relationship with species such as chicken, bees, rats, mermaids, bats, and crayfish. So here's a couple of other shots, so you understand kind of like the context in which I presented these books. And what's beautiful about all of them is that many of them have never made books in their practice. So this was an opportunity for them to see how they can interpret this format. And these are the books that were made for Interspecies Futures, 6 of them. The Pink Chicken Project by Non-Human Nonsense at the top, Hotel Symbiogenesis by Hypothetical Studios and Design Matter, a collective from the Netherlands and Korea. Up on the right is The Theory of Mermaid De-Extinction by Richard Pell, the founder of Center for Post-Natural History. At the bottom left is The Signal Crayfish, which I'll present today. Bottom center, Becoming a Bat by Noam Yongrak-son, an artist from Korea based in Belgium. And corner at the right is Non-Flowers by Thomas Post, who is actually French, but lives in Iceland for many years. So this is the artist of Signal Crayfish, Christopher Oram. I met him. He was part of a presentation at the 68 Art Institute in Copenhagen, which is an incredible art institution that invited me recently to do a presentation, and that's sort of how I heard about his practice. So I thought this project was incredible, and this was his challenge, the challenge that I posed to him. Can you turn this into a book? A bit about him. He's from Copenhagen, born in 1975, and this is his biography. Christopher is an interdisciplinary creature who has produced a long series of demonstrations, acts, and wireless transmissions, both in and outside of our solar system. Based in a basement, he works in the intersection between daily life and hypothetical digital ecologies. He holds dual degrees from Crayfish University in London and the Royal Danish Academy of Speculative Art in Copenhagen. He believes that all artist biographies are works of fiction and should be read as such. This is the book. As you can see, is actually quite large and thick. Is the design with many layers of 3D printed pages and papers, and you'll see what I mean. So the concept is a signal crayfish, which is considered an invasive species in Europe. An invasive species is an organism that is not indigenous or native to a particular area. And it can cause great economic and environmental harm to that new area. This species is Paciphastacus leniusculus, which is crayfish from North America. It's from the United States. It's a crustacean, and it's also known as the crawfish, crawdad, or crawdab. So what happened is that in Europe, especially in Nordic countries, they were having issues with, they have a local crayfish species, but there was there was a sickness, an illness that was happening to many of them. So they decided to bring this one signal crayfish from the United States to see if they can help with the population. And what ended up happening was sort of a disaster. This crayfish from America was actually bringing that same parasite, and so it started decimating the actual local population. And now the signal crayfish in Sweden, Finland, Denmark, Germany, it's everywhere, and the local governments don't know what to do with that. They create all sorts of like public education things to know how to get rid of them, eat them, cook them. And so here's a couple of news that I gathered. One is the unassuming crayfish and its path of devastation. Do not underestimate the signal crayfish. It is both a keystone species and a merciless invader of foreign streams. So this is from October 2017, and an earlier one from September 2016. This is how recent this invasive species is in Europe. This one is from a Danish newspaper. Killer crayfish found in Denmark's longest river. Small number of signal crayfish have been found along the banks of Gudenåen, Denmark's longest river, which flows through much of central Jutland. It is a non-native species in Denmark, and zoologist Morten Vising has little good to say about its appearance in the river. They eat the food source for other animals, and they eat the offspring of the other animals in the river, Vising told TV2 News. This could have disastrous consequences. Vising compared the crustaceans to rats and slugs and other invasive animals. They destroy everything they come near, he warned. So with this in mind, Christopher, who is Danish and started hearing all this news in Denmark, decided to create an entire project from the perspective of crayfish, but also what does it mean for an animal to be an invasive species in a specific city, in a kind of urban scenario. So after I commissioned this project, he started uploading on Instagram almost every day, or at least weekly, different updates of how the project was going. So here you can see he was creating patches, he was creating fake cover of magazines, he was creating 3D printed plates, an entire sort of ecosystem of experiences in which the crayfish was infiltrating the news, was infiltrating the media, and even the imagination of the Copenhagen citizens. At some point, he even imagines that he saw a crayfish basketball team in America. And so he invents this strange kind of like basketball jersey with the crayfish mascot. He's also sharing different 3D printing updates. And I'll show you why he made all these strange choices as I present the entire book for the first time, page by page. So this is the book. It's created with paper, cardboard, metal. There's techniques such as hydrographic printing, 3D printing, material using recycled filament, PLA, PETG, and nylon collected from the ocean, as well as some electronic parts. So the beauty of this book is in its insanity. The entire book is a trip. It's a trip into how an urban citizen arrives to this surreal understanding of what the crayfish is and how it goes from an invasive species to almost this strange concept of the species also invading the privacy of the person, including the data privacy. So it becomes conspiratorial in a sense. And so this is the trip. So I'll begin showing to you the book now. So this is the cover. The large 3 binders are a result of this book being designed during COVID-19 pandemic year and lockdown. These are the only binders he could find at a local hardware store. So that dictated the shape of the book. This is a 1-to-1 scale of a real crayfish, 3D printed in the cover. So the story begins like this. I was searching for images of signal crayfish online when I stumbled across a typeface design for a sports team called Crayfish, or perhaps Crawfish. I think it was an American football or basketball team, but I am unsure, and now I can't seem to find the Crayfish font or team anywhere, and I am beginning to think I might have imagined coming across the Crayfish team. But if I close my eyes, I can still see the font and smiling crayfish logo on the team's pink-green apparel. I can visualize a perky crayfish mascot strutting around, waving at the crowd as the game begins. In the stands, vendors in uniforms move through the crowd, peddling crayfish-flavored chips, deep-fried crayfish, and bright red crayfish soda. Around them are fans wearing crayfish hats who cheerfully wave imitation crayfish claws. Every time the crayfish team does well, they cheer as they eat and drink crayfish. In unison, the audience chant to the players on the field. No one can throw the ball like a crayfish can. Inside the audience's gastrointestinal tracts, part of what used to be crayfish trigger a cascade of neurotransmitters, causing sensations of joy, just as they inhibit the pain of the players on the field whose sore muscles have been rubbed in crayfish balm. Occasionally, some of the fans leave the stands and go to the bathroom to relieve themselves. From the porcelain bowls and plastic receptacles of the stadium, crayfish particulates in urine and feces are flushed into the sewers deep below. It is a nutrient-rich mix that feeds the thriving community of former pet alligators that now live there. They have themselves been flushed down the toilet by owners long ago, when they grew too large or unruly to be considered cute. They wave messages to each other in the dark as their claws crackle with static electricity, restlessly searching for wireless radiation to feed off. Around the huge reptiles, invasive signal crayfish thrive, named for the signalmen who controlled the early railroad using flags. They wave messages to each other in the dark as their claws crackle with static electricity, restlessly searching for wireless radiation to feed off, attracted to human nests by the myriad of routers and other wireless devices required to lead a contemporary lifestyle. Their blind eyes locate available wireless networks as they scuttle towards the surface in search of electromagnetic radiation. I cheer as the pink-green crayfish team scores another goal in my screen. Unaware that crayfish are transmitting incomprehensible messages to each other across the wireless networks that, along with my private information, carry the live game. Distractedly, I read an article on my mobile phone about how invasive signal crayfish are threatening to wipe out the native crayfish. The article ends with a quote from the Danish Nature Agency about how to wipe out the intruding crayfish. Find them, eat them, and enjoy them. In the commercial break, a politician warns of the links between immigration, COVID-19, 5G networks, and foreign cyber attacks. I glance at the antennas on my wireless router and wonder if whoever designed them was thinking of the long, spindly legs of crayfish. And here's the commercial. It is 1852, and the signal crayfish is first discovered in America, named after the signalman. With advanced modes of communication, fast forward to 1960. Global trade means Mr. Signal can travel to Europe. But things really start heating up in 2000 with climate change, turning up the temperature of Danish lakes and rivers. It was in 2018 that the crayfish successfully bypassed unguarded Danish borders. And in 2019, they reached our homes. They arrive in packages through toilets and hide in the shadows. They feed on our wireless networks, gobbling up our private data. In the big move from the natural world to humanity, crayfish are clearly capable of surviving in a world created by humans. I glance at the antennas on my wireless router and wonder if whoever designed them was thinking of the long, spindly legs of crayfish. They look a lot like those of the crayfish that keep finding their way into my apartment. Just this morning, I woke up next to a small crayfish nuzzled under the covers between me and my smartphone. Its shiny black eyes seemed to be looking at me with little interest as it fed on my private data. My thoughts are interrupted by a commercial for a chain of seafood restaurants. It shows a group of smiling and dancing cartoon crayfish. They look ecstatic as they simmer in their own sauce, ostensibly enjoying their own demise and subsequent consumption. I put my ear to the cool and slippery shell of the television and hear soft clicking sounds inside. It feels like I am embracing a giant crayfish. Inside, I hear the voice of the crayfish letting me know that it is aware of me, telling me that it dreams of communicating with humans and breaking through the foolishness of our human exceptionalism. Letting me know that becoming human is something that happens in concert with our surroundings, whether technological or natural, not on our own terms. I feel a tingle of doubt as I pull back my ear from the electromagnetic embrace of the crayfish, and it once again becomes a television. I realized that I was just projecting my own romantic ideas of what a crayfish might say into the abstract sounds I hear or I heard inside. I was listening to the sounds of a creature whose body and senses differ greatly from mine, but only hearing my own voice. I had forgotten the multiplicity of ways in which the living matter around us senses and reflects in ways we will never understand. The phone vibrates softly in my hand, and I notice that it has connected to a new wireless network called Stop Stealing My Data. I think it is my neighbor's network. They must think someone, perhaps Signal Crayfish, is hacking into their private wireless network. I look at the list of Wi-Fi networks ranges on the screen. Their names form a collective portrait of the place where I live, an invisible text written collectively by those who live here without their realizing it. I imagine the invisible electromagnetic radiation that carries this text. It is a both strange and familiar landscape where clouds of personal data escape through windows, vents, or thin walls. Private data spilling out into the world from the confines of businesses or homes, forming an unstable electromagnetic landscape that exists anywhere humans and their companion devices are to be found. A landscape connecting a multitude of digital systems around us that senses and reflect on us in ways we will never understand. I am reminded of how the cartographers who drew medieval European maps filled unfamiliar areas with dangerous dragons and other mythical creatures, placing the unknown and mythical where knowledge was lacking. As an invasive species, signal crayfish roam both the invisible territories of ubiquitous wireless transmissions and the fragile ecosystems of our waterways. They signal that the unknown and mythical of today is not located in faraway lands, but is as close as the electromagnetic radiation produced by a mobile phone in our hand. I glance at the journal of Technoconciliorum Aesthetics on my table. It is open on an article about Krebs's signaler on interaction of autonomy y representación hysterion, which means crayfish signals on interaction and autonomy in the history of representation. The force of the oral commentary from the television makes the printed words on the page unintelligible and unfamiliar. It is as if my eyes are slightly out of joint. The rhythmic blocks of text and images are still visible to me, but as a pattern of light and shadow without meaning. I am unable to recognize words that I have been able to read since I was little. As the commentary on the television short circuits the meaning I usually ascribe to these abstract patterns. I am becoming an estranged signal crayfish, looking at myself as an alien. Unable to close my ears, I close my eyes. Here, signal crayfish reside between the organic and the technological, in a messy space consisting of equal parts ethereal radiation and corporeal bodies. This animal species is able to thrive in these strange ecologies we humans have been creating for ourselves for millennia. They have something to teach us about how to live in a world where the combined weight of all the plastic, bricks, and other things made by humans outweigh all animals and plants on the planet. They hold a promise of a world where humans and non-human creatures and systems might develop in concert rather than opposition. I step out of the imagined world of signal crayfish sports team and invisible electromagnetic landscapes. I return to find my body, wearing a pink and green sweater, in front of a computer, moving on to the next image in my search for crayfish imagery. Unable to shake the feeling that the relationship of humans both to other life forms and to digital systems might be quite different. And this is Signal Crayfish by Christopher Oram, 2021. So I'll just keep sharing a couple of more images, but if you guys have any questions.
Yes, can you see us and hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, do you have questions?
Thank you, Oscar, for the presentation about crayfish. I've lived and worked in South Louisiana in the US for like the last 20 years. And so I had this really quick reaction to the idea of signal crayfish as a crawfish signal. Because, well, first, the name that you mentioned, crayfish, is known as crawfish there. And there's this, if I inverse the name of the book from signal crayfish to crawfish signal, currently the ecological crisis along the coast of South Louisiana has been caused by the petrochemical industry, well, since the last 50 or 60 years. And it's the crawfish fishermen and farmers who observed the invasion of the pipelines carrying natural gas, destroying the environment and the native habitat of the crawfish, which is seen as this sort of destruction of a culinary tradition, but more importantly to rural people and then also urban people in South Louisiana, the destruction of a cultural practice where the boiling of crawfish is not just to eat a massive mound of crawfish, 5 pounds per person usually, but to share music, to share large amounts of beer and family. And so it's like not a crawfish boil for 4 people or 5 people, it's more like 25 or 50 once every 2 or 3 weeks during that tight season. So it's really interesting to focus on that ecological crisis of an invasion of a species. That is being pushed out by another invasion of sort of human movement as well. But thank you for those images. And also you mentioned, or the author mentioned, crawfish or crayfish chips. So that exists. The mark Zapp's Crawtators, and it's the hot, spicy taste of crawfish boil spices added to potato chips. I haven't seen the mascot of the team, but I'm sure it exists too.
Yeah, I wonder if that exists in Denmark as well. So one thing I noticed from the research, also researching myself into this project, is that in the Nordic countries they have a species of crayfish that is local, and it's actually considered a delicacy. So you can buy in the market, or if you go to a restaurant and you get the local crayfish, it will be priced twice as much as the signal crayfish. So even that, you have that's almost a political statement as well, right? Where the local one is more precious and the invasive one is like this undesirable. So it's like there's more of them, there's less important, and who knows if the taste is different. I never tried both of them, so I don't know if that's a subjective thing, but you're right. I like what you bring up, because this concept of invasive species is quite polemical, controversial, because many times the invasive species are introduced by humans. So it's not that they decided to just invade Europe, right? It's because they were brought up for a specific purpose and it got out of hand. And that's a very common thing in the history of and I think also in New Orleans, right? Or in Louisiana, there is this, what is katsu? Is that the invasive plants that was brought from, I believe, Japan or Asia, and it suddenly started proliferating around the landscape of the South, and it's become something of a local signature now. So that's also something interesting. Where does this kind of invasive species go from an alien entity into becoming part of the local culture again? And I think that's also kind of interesting to think about.
Thank you, Oscar. Do you have any more questions? I have one. I was wondering why amongst the 6 books you commissioned for your exhibition, why did you choose this one to share it with us today? Why this one in particular?
Thank you. This one, I think, because the artist really didn't have specific book design background. And so the result was what, to me, the most surprising one. The way he interpreted the book, the idea of using recycled plastic from the ocean to print the crayfish in this material, to print the pages, the messages. There was just so many layers. And also how he started to connect that, an invasive species to the invasion of privacy, and all of these conspiratorial thoughts that are happening these days because of 5G and immigrants. I just thought it was sort of a very representative of the time that we're living in, where ecology and politics and all of these complex issues could be represented in a single book with a few pages. I just thought it was incredible. And also because the amount of effort and experimentation he put into the book, considering that this was created during the lockdown, so all of these things the pages were printed in his home. He already had a 3D printer because he used that in his artistic practice. The binder and the cloths, that they were all found in local store. So everything was hyper local, but also hyper universal. If you think about it, all of the topics are very, very present in many different parts of the world now. These issues with immigration and data breach of privacy.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing this book, because there is only one copy, right? It was handmade and there is only one copy in the world. So you shared it with us, and maybe it was the only way we can read it if we're not in New York during your exhibition.
Yes, and I'll show you a couple more images if you want to see as well, just so you show you some more details and like how people were interacting with it. And then like even the one where he invents from his imagination, he invents this like crayfish basketball team. He actually used a hydrographic printing technique, which is quite amazing. You submerge a plate or an object in a film, printed film on the water. It's very, very strange to explain, but it's a fascinating method. And also the idea of like putting a crayfish in the cover of a train toy models. Like there were so many surrealistic moments that he bring into this book that sort of like plays with the sense of reality and fiction and the edges of that. And all of these network, wireless network names are actually taken from his surroundings. So these are the real names of the wireless, the wireless networks in this gigantic map of the city. This is a high relief print of the plan of Copenhagen, 3D printed. And he really sent a Wi-Fi microchip, which this model is the ESP8266. So there's all these fantastic moments in the book, and this is sort of how it looks like in the show. These are some Instagram stories, photos of people visiting it. I think what was incredible about this experience is the kind of people that were coming in. You know, we had sociologists, scientists, paleontologists, people working between neuroscience and art, architects, new media artists, and they were all quite fascinated by this selection and the depth of the research and proposals. And even like really the very last day, someone actually asked me if they can use the claw, the crayfish claw, to read the book. So she went through the full book with the claw. So yeah, it was very fun.
Other questions? I have a last one about the way you presented this book to us, because it was a Zoom book review. And since the COVID-19 pandemic, you have adopted the Zoom lecture format to present your exhibitions and some books, as I believe you did it for the first time with the Lemon Brothers Cerro Point Blanco, published at the time of the exhibition of the same name at 68 Art Institute in Copenhagen in August 2020. What interests you about this tool of video conferencing to share books and exhibitions? What does it allow you to present and share books?
I think it's very helpful in the sense that you can augment a lot of the aspects of the book. You know, you can share pictures of people, how people are using it, but you can also share like news clips. I haven't done so much videos. I did some video before. That helps also. Obviously, nothing compares to the original, to seeing it in person, which is why the Interspecies Futures show, I decided to have them all laid out on the table, not under a vitrine or protected against people, but out in the open for people to flip through them. So that's why in this presentation particularly, I did an experiment where I really wanted to show every single spread of the book as if you're leafing through it, and as if you're experiencing the entire story from beginning to end, the way the artist really intended it. But I think it's a tool that needs more, you know, I think we all came into this tool by default, by accident. And I didn't really plan to use it, but I think it's pushed my understanding of how to talk about a book from a long distance and without you having the book in your hands. I think there's a lot of value to that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah, I really hope one day I can show this collection to in Europe or maybe in France. It's an archive now. It's going to be an archive, the Interspecies Library, highlighting all of these books that are made by contemporary artists, proposing futures and new relationships with other species.
Thank you. Yeah, I hope we can see this show in Europe maybe someday.
Yeah, me too.
Have a nice day. See you.
Thank you, guys. Good luck.
Bye-bye.
Bye.